everyone, Cornell here. Welcome to my Blooming Bakes channel. Today I'm going to show you how to stack a 2-tier cake. Remember to hit the like button if you find this useful and subscribe to my channel to see more from me in the future. So what you're going to need to do this is obviously your tiers of cake. So you can see I've got 2 tiers here ready already. And you're going to need cake cards. So each tier cake is already decorated and covered on a cake card. Now you want your cake card to have a hole in the middle, especially for your top tier, because you're going to drop it over a central dowel. So before you decorate your cakes onto your cake card, make sure you put a hole right in the middle of your cake card. You can just use a sharp knife or scissors, watch out for your fingers, or if you do lots of these, it's easier just to mark the spot and drill a hole through a few at the same time. So a quick and easy trick on how to find the middle spot is use a bit of baking paper, trace your cake card and cut it out, and then you just fold your circle like so, and just snip off the very end, and when you open it up you have a little circle right in the middle. So if you put this back onto your cake card and mark a spot in the middle, you know exactly where to drill your hole or make a hole with scissors. So that's the easy way to do it. Now, you will see I already have a central dowel in my cake board. Now, I like to use stronger MDF cake boards when I know my cake is being transported, especially if it's being transported by customers and not yourself, who might not be used to traveling with a cake in the car. So MDF cake boards are very hard inside. You can hear it's like solid, it's almost solid wood. So you can actually drill a hole in the middle of your cake board, and I like to drill it exactly to the size of my cake dowel. So you can stick your cake dowel into the board. I've just put some sellotape over the bottom so it doesn't go right through, and that gives you a bit of an anchor so that your cake doesn't move. However, a lot of bakers use normal cake drums, which looks like that, quite thick. You can feel it's quite lightweight. You can hear that, it almost sounds hollow. It's very loose inside. If you try to drill a hole in a cake drum, it just disintegrates. It's like compressed cardboard inside. It's really not very strong inside, so you can't drill a hole through this. So if you're using a normal cake drum, then you're going to put your first tier on the board first, and then you can just add your central cake dowel, but I'll talk you through that again when we get to that step, so just keep that in mind. But if you use a stronger type of cake board, like the MDF ones, it is useful to drill a hole, and it's got a bit of an anchor so your cake can't slide off the board. Right, so that's your cake boards, your cake cards. You're also going to need some cake dowels. Now I am using cake dowels that's obviously food safe and approved for using with food. Don't just use any type of medium, it needs to be food safe. And these ones are quite easy to snap. So if you measure where you want it to be in terms of height, you just make a small incision with a sharp knife and it just snaps clean off. So it's quite easy to cut to the length that you need. So you need some cake dowels, a little sharp knife to cut with, a little marker or just a normal pen even to mark where you want to cut your cake dowels. And then lastly, I've got some chocolate ganache that I'm going to use as glue to stick my tiers to the board and to each other. You can use royal icing I tend to steer away from normal buttercream because it's quite soft. So you want something that will set quite hard and act like a good strong cement to hold your cake together. So chocolate ganache or royal icing is really good to use. And then I also just have a cake lifter to help me get my tiers where I want it to be, and a little spatula for doing the ganache. So let's get started. So I'm going to start with putting my first tier on this board. Now what you first want to do is put some chocolate ganache at the bottom, which is going to be the cement for your cake to stand on. So let's do that. I know more or less where my cake is going to be. That's a 10-inch cake and this is a 12-inch cake board. So I know my cake is going to be quite wide. It's going to come to around there. So I can be quite generous with my chocolate ganache and give it a nice firm base to stand on. If you want, you can obviously measure and just make little markers for yourself about where the cake board or the cake card will be on your cake board, so that you don't go over that edge with your chocolate ganache or your royal icing. Okay, so there we've got our chocolate ganache. We're now going to drop our first tier cake onto this. Now because I've got a central dowel already, I'm going to drop my cake level over this, and remember my cake card under this cake already has a hole in the middle. So I can bend down, see where the hole is and drop it down. If you're using the normal cake drum and you don't have your central dowel in yet, it's dead easy. You're just going to place your first tier onto your cake drum and you'll add your central dowel afterwards. So let me get my first tier cake. Grab a fondant smoother if you're working with a fondant cake, and just if you have messed up the sides a little bit, you can just smooth it out. There we go. And we can just take a little bit off at the top. If your hands are white. So that's our first tier in place. I had to be careful where I position it because when you drop it in over a cake dowel, you obviously want that cake dowel to come out in the middle of your cake. It's much easier if you can place your cake first. You can put your cake dowel exactly dead center where you want it. So do be careful when you've got a cake dowel in your board already that you level your cake in a way and you make sure your cake dowel comes out in the middle of your cake. So next up we're going to add cake dowels to our first tier, which will sit level with the top of your first tier. And these cake dowels will basically act like a table, the legs of a table for which the next tier is going to sit on. So it provides a lot of support for the weight of your next tier cake. Remember, cake is super heavy, and especially if you've done fondant cakes with chocolate ganache, it adds a lot of weight. And if you're going to add your next tier to this tier without any support structure, the weight of the next tier will crush the bottom tier and it will sag and you'll start seeing bulging fondant and all kinds of problems. It might fall over. So the next step of providing support is really, really important. Now, just before we do that, it's also worth noting I'm working with fondant cakes. You might wonder, well, how do you do this process if I'm working with buttercream cakes? Just make sure your buttercream cake was in the fridge, so the buttercream is set hard, and then you use exactly the same process to stack a buttercream cake. But make sure it was in the fridge and your buttercream is set rock hard, so that when you handle your cake, you're not going to mess up your buttercream. Alright, so let's do our cake dowels. Now again, I know my next tier is an 8-inch tier, so it's going to come quite wide around this cake, and I've got a lot of playroom to go with. The general rule of thumb is you want 1 cake dowel per 2 inches of the next tier. So I'm going to do 4 cake dowels around the center one to support my next cake. So what we're going to do first off is we push it in. All the way right to the bottom. Make sure it's all the way to the bottom. Use an edible pen or a normal pen if you don't have it, and just make yourself a little marker. If you're using buttercream cakes, you often will have a marker where the buttercream touches the cake dowel in any case. We're going to pull this out. You can see there's my little marker. And we're now going to cut this to that length. So using a sharp little knife, I'm going to just run it around the cake dowel. And you'll see how easy these ones just snaps, okay? Now this one is now our benchmark for the rest. So we need another 3 like this. You don't have to stick them all in the cake. You can now just measure it against the one that you've cut to the correct size. You want to make sure they are all exactly the same height, because this is going to be our table legs for the next tier. So if your table legs are not the same height, you're going to have a table that's lopsided and it might cause your cake to fall. So next one. Okay, so I've got my 4 equal length cake dowels. So we can now add them to the cake. Push that one back in where it was. Okay, basically distributing the weight equally around your central dowel. If you're only placing your central dowel now, or if you've done it before like I did, you also need to measure your central dowel. So I have measured already how high my first and my second tier would be. You don't want your central dowel to be so long that when you put your final tier in, it's going to stick through the top of your cake and undo all of your beautiful decoration. So make sure that what is left of your central dowel is less than the height of your final tier. If you've got a 3-tier cake, you're going to repeat the process that we're going to do with the second tier now for every tier after the second tier. So you want to make sure your central dowel is long enough for all of your tiers and shorter than the total height of your cake. Okay, so for our second tier, we now need to add chocolate ganache again on top there. Okay, so our chocolate ganache is ready and we're going to now drop our next tier onto this. Again, remember my 8-inch second tier is already decorated on an 8-inch cake card with a hole in the middle. So I already have that hole ready to drop onto my central dowel. So I am going to use my cake lifter. Now when you drop your next tier on, please remember that you align the back of your cake with your first tier as well. So if there is a particular side of your cake that you want to be in front, well, my front of my cake is there because I've got a little seam at the back here in my fondant. So I need to make sure if I've got a back and front, you line it correctly and drop your cake in the right place, because once it's down and it will be difficult to move after that. So that is my second tier onto the cake, and you can see because I've sort of dropped it and took my fingers away, I haven't messed up the sides of this one at all. It's actually perfect. However, if you've got a little gap that you can see between your tiers, if it's a buttercream cake, what you will do at this stage, stack all of the tiers to make sure you're done, and then you will just pipe a little bit of buttercream around the edge between your tiers and smooth it out, or use a nozzle to pipe a decorative bit of buttercream around the edges where the two tiers meet. If you work with a fondant cake like I am today, you can add fondant lining or decorations around where the tiers meet to make it a nice professional finish to your cake. I am actually planning to add some decoration to the design of this cake in any case, so I am going to hide my the seams where the two tiers meet with fondant decoration. So I will pop a picture of the final cake after this in the video. So that's it from me today. As I said, if you want to add a third tier to your cake, you will just follow exactly the same process and repeat the steps that we've done for our second tier to add a third tier to your cake, remembering that you need enough dowels to support the weight of your total cake. So do remember that when you decide how many dowels to put into your bottom tier, building upwards. I hope this has been useful. Remember to subscribe to my channel to see more from me in the future. See you soon.